Hello and welcome back to RPG PhD. I'm Dr. Ben. If you've been running or playing tabletop role-playing games long enough, you've probably felt this before. Something at the table just feels off. Combat drags, players hesitate, prep feels heavier than it should. Everyone's doing their part, yet the game isn't landing the way you'd hoped. When that happens, most of us jump straight to fixes. We tweak encounters, adjust house rules, or wonder whether the players or the game master are the problem. Those instincts are understandable, but they often skip an important step: diagnosis. Before a problem can be solved, it has to be understood. In tabletop role-playing games, that's trickier than it sounds. Pacing issues can look like motivation problems. Clarity issues can look like rules problems. Tension gets blamed on story or tone. Without a way to separate symptoms from causes, it's easy to fix the wrong thing. Game designer Jesse Schell offers a useful framework for this in The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses. In this episode, I'm going to frame Schell's lenses as diagnostic tools that both game masters and designers can use to improve their games, by understand what's really happening before trying to change it. So grab a drink and let's get started. Jesse Schell is a game designer, educator, and researcher best known for his work bridging practical game development with design theory. He's worked across video games, theme parks, and interactive media, including time at Disney Imagineering. Schell is widely respected for The Art of Game Design, which distills decades of design practice into a flexible, analytical framework. Rather than presenting rigid rules, his work emphasizes asking better questions about how games function, how players experience them, and how systems shape behavior, an approach that translates especially well to the improvisational, social nature of tabletop role-playing games. One important thing to know about Schell's book is its scope. The Art of Game Design presents roughly 100 different lenses, each offering a distinct way of examining how games function. That breadth is intentional, and it reflects the complexity of game design as a discipline. In this episode, we are only going to focus on a small subset of those lenses, specifically the ones that translate to tabletop role-playing games and that function well as diagnostic tools for both game masters and designers. The goal here is depth and applicability, not necessarily completeness. When Schell talks about lenses, he's describing a way of examining games that prioritizes observation over judgment. A lens is a deliberate perspective you adopt when looking at a game in action. Each one takes the form of a question, and that question brings a specific aspect of play into focus. Seen this way, lenses function as diagnostic instruments. They direct attention. They help you notice patterns that are already present in the experience of play. This diagnostic framing is supported by long-standing work in systems theory, which consistently separates observation from intervention. Systems researcher Donella Meadows argues that complex systems tend to resist change when their behavior is misunderstood, and that well-intentioned fixes often make problems worse when they target symptoms rather than structure. Lenses function in this tradition as observation tools. They help reveal feedback loops, bottlenecks, and incentives before any changes are made. In tabletop role-playing games, this distinction matters. Altering rules or procedures without diagnosing how players actually behave often shifts friction elsewhere rather than resolving it. A diagnostic lens helps identify leverage points, places where a small adjustment changes the system's behavior rather than treating surface-level effects. This diagnostic approach is also supported by research in cognitive psychology, particularly John Sweller's cognitive load theory. Sweller's work shows that performance and learning degrade when mental effort exceeds available capacity, especially in complex problem-solving environments. This maps directly onto tabletop play where attention is shared, social, and constantly shifting. It reinforces the importance of particular lenses by reframing familiar problems. Instead of asking whether a system is elegant or well designed in the abstract, the diagnostic question becomes more concrete. Where is player attention being spent right now, and what is competing for it? Seen this way, disengagement, hesitation, and fatigue are not failures of interest or skill, they are signals that cognitive load has exceeded what the moment can support. So, for example, the lens of experience asks what players are actually doing and feeling from moment to moment at the table. The lens of choice looks at the decisions players are making and whether those decisions have visible consequences. The lens of time examines how long actions and uncertainties are sustained, both in the fiction and in real time. These lenses do not evaluate whether the game is succeeding or failing, they reveal how it behaves. That distinction matters because both game masters and designers carry assumptions into play. We might remember how a rule worked in a previous campaign. We may interpret quiet players as disengaged. We might trust that high narrative stakes automatically produce tension. Lenses interrupt those assumptions by slowing observation down. They create just enough distance to let us see what is actually happening instead of what we expect to see. Schell also emphasizes that lenses are most effective when used individually. Each lens isolates a single variable. Looking through several at once tends to blur cause and effect. When something feels strained or confusing, the process is simple. Choose one lens, ask its question honestly, and observe. The aim is clarity. Once clarity is achieved, decisions about change become easier. For role-playing games, this approach is especially useful because so much of play exists outside the written rules. The game unfolds through conversation, pacing, attention, and social cues. Lenses give us a shared vocabulary for diagnosing those elements without reducing them to vague impressions or vibes. They allow us to say something specific is happening here and I can describe it, which is often the first step toward improving play. The lens of experience focuses on a single diagnostic question. What is the player experiencing in the moment at the table? This includes what they're doing, where their attention rests, and how engaged they feel as play unfolds. This lens sits at the center of Schell's framework because experience is where games actually exist. Rules only matter once they translate into actions. In role-playing games, experience extends beyond mechanics. It includes listening to others speak, tracking the situation, anticipating outcomes, and sometimes sitting quietly while play moves elsewhere. Applied honestly, this lens often surfaces mismatches between intention and outcome. A combat encounter designed to feel dramatic may produce extended stretches of inactivity. A mystery intended to spark curiosity may instead generate uncertainty or confusion. A social scene built around tension may concentrate attention on a single speaker while others drift away. These observations are not judgments about quality, they describe the experience the system is currently producing. One of the most valuable habits this lens encourages is sustained attention to downtime. When a player is not actively acting, what are they doing? Some players plan ahead or follow the fiction closely. Others disengage as their relevance fades. Experience continues even when action pauses, and repeated stretches of passivity tend to drain energy from the table over time. This lens also helps distinguish between fictional intensity and player engagement. A scene may be charged in the narrative while feeling inert in play if resolution stretches too long or outcomes feel predetermined. Watching for when players stop leaning forward and start waiting provides an early signal that experience is shifting. For game masters, the lens of experience offers a clear diagnostic entry point. When a moment feels flat or sluggish, attention can turn toward what players are actually doing right now. That observation often suggests where adjustment is needed, whether through pacing, spotlight distribution, or clearer framing of the situation. For designers, the same lens reveals how procedures shape moment-to-moment play across repeated sessions. The strength of this lens lies in its emphasis on observation. It asks you to treat play itself as evidence. By attending closely to lived experience at the table, the lens of experience helps ground decisions in what the game is producing rather than what it was meant to produce. The lens of choice focuses on decision making at the table, what decisions players are presented with, how clearly those decisions are framed, and how much influence those decisions have on what happens next. Schell describes games as systems built around choice. Those choices operate across several layers at once. Players choose actions for their characters, choose when to speak or stay quiet, choose how much risk to accept, and choose how to deeply engage with uncertainty. When those choices feel unclear or disconnected from outcomes, energy at the table tends to drop. This lens often reveals patterns of constrained agency. Players may be offered multiple options, yet the structure of the situation funnels them toward a single outcome. Over time, players learn which decisions actually change the situation and which ones simply advance procedure. As that pattern becomes visible, decision-making shifts from exploration to routine. The lens of choice also draws attention to information. A decision becomes meaningful when players understand what is at stake and what might change as a result. When situations are under-specified, players often respond with caution or delay. When context is clear, players commit more readily. Hesitation, viewed through this lens, usually signals missing or ambiguous information rather than indecision. For game masters, this lens directs attention toward consequences rather than quantity. The structure of a decision matters more than the number of options presented. When outcomes are legible and connected to the unfolding situation, even simple choices carry weight. For designers, the same lens reveals how systems teach players which decisions are worth their attention over repeated play. At the table, the lens of choice can be applied quickly. When play slows or stalls, the diagnostic question becomes straightforward. What decision is being asked for, and what effect will it have? When the answer is difficult to articulate, the adjustment often lies in clarifying stakes, pressures, or responses rather than changing mechanics. Used alongside the lens of experience, this lens helps explain why some scenes generate momentum while others fade. Engagement grows when players recognize that their decisions shape the game in visible and lasting ways. The lens of time examines how time is experienced during play and what that experience communicates to the table. Time operates across several layers at once: time within the fiction, time required by procedures, and real-world time passing at the table. Tension and momentum are shaped by how those layers interact. Schell describes time as one of the most powerful signals a game sends to its players. Duration communicates importance. Actions that take longer feel weighty. Actions that resolve quickly feel lighter. These signals emerge whether they are intended or not, and players learn from them through repeated play. This lens often reveals patterns of temporal distortion. A brief moment in the fiction can expand into a lengthy resolution process, stretching seconds into minutes. As that expansion grows, urgency tends to thin. Players shift from emotional response to procedural attention. The scene may retain its narrative significance, yet the lived experience becomes slower and more analytical. The lens of time also draws attention to waiting. Turn-based structures regularly place players into observer roles. When those stretches are filled with anticipation, planning, relevance, engagement often holds. When nothing is demanded of the waiting player, attention often drifts. Over time, repeated waiting without involvement reshapes how invested players feel in unfolding events. This lens also highlights the role of pressure. Time constraints, advancing threats, and visible countdowns tend to focus decision-making. Choices acquire weight when delay carries consequences. Scenes with clear temporal pressure often generate more momentum than scenes with higher narrative stakes, but open-ended timing. For game masters, the diagnostic question is simple. How long is this taking, and what does that length communicate? Lengthy procedures may signal importance even when none is intended. Rapid resolution may undercut moments meant to feel significant. Adjustments can often be made through pacing, framing, or summarization without changing the underlying system. Designers can apply the same observation across playtests to see where time consistently expands or contracts. When viewed alongside the lenses of experience and choice, the lens of time helps explain why tension sometimes collapses without an obvious cause. Players may understand the situation and care about the outcome, yet still disengage when the rhythm of play works against the moment. Time quietly teaches players what matters, and this lens makes that lesson visible. The lens of complexity asks how much effort the game demands from the players and what that effort produces in return. Complexity in itself is neutral. It becomes a problem only when it asks for more attention than the experience can sustain. Schell treats complexity as a resource. Every rule, modifier, and exception competes for cognitive space. That space is limited and shared. When too much of it is consumed by procedures, less remains for imagination, decision-making, and emotional investment. This lens often reveals systems that are doing unnecessary work. Subsystems pile up over time, edge cases accumulate, and resolution procedures grow longer than the situations they are meant to model. The result is fatigue rather than depth. Players may still succeed mechanically, but their engagement thins as attention shifts from the fiction to the process. Complexity also shapes who gets to participate. Players comfortable with rules tend to dominate systems with high procedural density. Others withdraw, not because they lack interest, but because the effort required to act feels disproportionate. The lens of complexity makes these participation gaps visible. For game masters, this lens offers a practical diagnostic question. What does this rule ask the table to track, remember, or calculate, and what experience does that produce? If the answer is unclear, the rule may be a candidate for simplification, summarization, or removal. Reducing complexity often increases clarity, which in turn improves pace and choice. For designers, the lens of complexity becomes a playtesting question. Where does cognitive effort consistently concentrate? And what kind of play does that effort produce? During tests, attention can be paid to which rules players reference most often, which procedures slow momentum, and where understanding breaks down or narrows participation. If complexity clusters around moments meant to feel fast, tense, or expressive, that's a signal worth examining. Importantly, this lens does not argue for minimalism. Some games thrive on intricate systems, especially when mastery itself is part of the fun. The goal is alignment. Complexity should serve the experience the table wants, not compete with it. When applied alongside the previous lenses, complexity often explains why a game feels heavy, even when everyone understands the rules. The effort required to engage may simply exceed what the moment can support. The lens of goals examines what players are trying to accomplish at a given moment and how clearly those aims are communicated through play. It focuses on intention, what players believe they are working toward right now, and what the game suggests is worth pursuing. Schell identifies goals as a foundational element of game because they organize attention and effort. In role-playing games, goals often operate on several levels at once. Characters may have fictional objectives, players may have personal or strategic aims, and the system itself may imply priorities through rewards, risks, and procedures. When those layers align, play tends to move forward with confidence. This lens often reveals why scenes stall or drift. Players may appear hesitant or passive when they are unsure what success looks like in the current situation. Long-term campaign goals can feel distant if no short-term objectives are visible. Even experienced players may slow down when the game does not clearly signal what matters right now. The lens of goals also highlights misalignment. A narrative goal may point in one direction while the system rewards behavior that pulls elsewhere. Over time, players adapt to what the game consistently reinforces, even when that differs from stated intentions. Observing where player effort actually goes provides useful diagnostic information. For game masters, this lens offers a practical question during play. What do the players think they are trying to achieve in this scene? When the answer feels vague, progress often improves once the situation is framed with clear stakes, pressures, or objectives. This does not require railroading. It involves making the current focus legible. For designers, the lens of goals is especially valuable during playtesting. It reveals whether players can articulate what they are working toward without prompting, and whether the system supports those aims consistently. Viewed alongside the lenses of experience and choice, the lens of goals helps explain momentum. Players engage more readily when they know what they are aiming for and believe their actions can move them closer. Clear goals give direction to decision-making and coherence to play as it unfolds. The lens of rules examines how the rules of a game shape behavior at the table. It focuses on what the system consistently encourages players to do through incentives, constraints, and rewards, regardless of stated tone or narrative intention. Schell treats rules as the primary drivers of player behavior. Rules determine what actions are easy or difficult, what risks are rewarded, and what outcomes are reinforced over time. In role-playing games, this influence is often subtle, emerging through repeated play rather than explicit instruction. This lens frequently reveals gaps between intention and outcome. A game may describe itself as heroic or dramatic, while its rules reward caution and optimization. A system may encourage improvisation in theory while penalizing deviation in practice. Observing how players adapt their behavior across session provides clearer evidence than reading rules text in isolation. The lens of rules also helps diagnose recurring patterns that feel personal on the surface. When players consistently avoid certain actions, rely on a narrow set of tactics, or focus on specific subsystems, the cause is often structural. The rules are teaching them what matters by consistently reinforcing those choices. For game masters, this lens offers a way to understand player behavior without attributing it to attitude or playstyle. Asking which rules are shaping decisions in the moment often clarifies why players act conservatively, aggressively, or procedurally. Small adjustments in emphasis, interpretation, or reward can shift behavior without rewriting the system. For designers, the lens of rules is central during playtesting. It reveals how incentives actually function once players internalize them. If players consistently pursue outcomes that differ from the intended experience, the rules are communicating priorities more clearly than the text. That pattern points toward targeted revision questions rather than broad redesigns. Viewed alongside the lenses of goals and choice, the lens of rules helps explain why players pursue certain objectives and ignore others. Over time, rules define the shape of play by teaching players which actions are worth their attention and effort. The lens of feedback examines how a game responds to player action and how clearly those responses are communicated. It focuses on what players learn from the game as they act and how quickly and reliably that learning occurs. Schell emphasizes feedback as a core component of play. Feedback tells players whether an action had an effect, what kind of effect it was, and how the situation has changed as a result. In role-playing games, feedback often arrives through narration, consequences, and social response, as well as numerical indicators. This lens often reveals why players hesitate or repeat ineffective actions. When feedback is delayed, ambiguous, or inconsistent, players struggle to interpret outcomes. They may become cautious, default to familiar routines, or disengage from experimentation. Observing how often players ask what happened or what changed provides useful diagnostic information. The lens of feedback also highlights the relationship between action and consequence. When the connection between the two is clear, players build confidence and momentum. When that connection is unclear, even successful actions can feel unsatisfying. Over time, players adapt to whatever signals the game consistently provides, whether or not those signals align with design intent. For game masters, this lens offers a practical point of focus during play. After a player acts, attention can turn toward what the game communicates in response. Clear feedback may involve explicit consequences, visible changes in the situation, or immediate reactions from the environment and the NPCs. These signals help players understand the impact of their choices. For designers, the lens of feedback is essential during playtesting. It reveals whether outcomes are legible without explanation and whether players can infer cause and effect across repeated actions. Patterns of confusion or repeated clarification requests often indicate feedback that needs strengthening. Viewed alongside the lenses of choice and rules, the lens of feedback helps explain how players learn what the game values. Over time, feedback shapes behavior by reinforcing certain actions and discouraging others, making it one of the most powerful diagnostic tools available. The lens of surprise examines how often and in what ways a game disrupts player expectations. It focuses on moments where outcomes feel uncertain, information is incomplete, or the situation changes in an unexpected yet understandable way. Surprise functions as a signal that players are discovering something new about the game or the world it presents. Schell treats surprise as a vital source of engagement. Games hold attention when players cannot fully predict what will happen next, while still feeling that outcomes are connected to their actions. In role-playing games, surprise often emerges through unfolding fiction, hidden information, emergent consequences, or shifting circumstances, rather than through randomness alone. This lens frequently reveals patterns of predictability. When players begin to anticipate outcomes with confidence, scenes can lose energy even when stakes remain high. Encounters resolve along familiar lines. Twists land softly. Discovery gives way to routine. Observing how often players are genuinely caught off guard provides useful diagnostic information about how much uncertainty the system allows. The lens of surprise also helps diagnose frustration. Surprise that feels disconnected from player action tends to erode trust, while surprise that grows organically from the situation tends to increase curiosity. Watching player reactions in the moment, whether it be laughter, tension, sudden recalibration, offers insight into whether surprise is supporting engagement or undermining it. For game masters, this lens suggests a reflective question. When was the last time the table encountered something that they did not expect but could immediately understand? Small shifts in information, consequence, or opposition can reintroduce uncertainty without invalidating prior choices. The goal is not constant shock, but sustained curiosity. For designers, the lens of surprise is valuable during playtesting because it reveals how systems handle uncertainty over repeated use. If outcomes become easy to forecast, surprise may be too tightly constrained. If outcomes feel arbitrary, surprise may lack grounding. Tracking when players express genuine discovery helps identify where uncertainty is working as intended. Viewed alongside the lenses of choice and feedback, the lens of surprise clarifies how novelty and learning emerge in play. Surprise keeps players attentive by reminding them that the game still has something to reveal, making it a powerful diagnostic tool for maintaining engagement over time. The lens of challenge examines how difficulty is experienced during play and how that difficulty changes over time. It focuses on the relationship between effort, risk, and reward, and on whether the level of challenge sustains engagement across scenes and sessions. Schell treats challenge as a dynamic element rather than a fixed value. Games hold attention when challenge rises and falls in response to player capability, circumstance, and choice. At the tabletop, challenge is not shaped only by numbers and mechanics, but also by information, pressure, and consequence. This lens often reveals mismatches between difficulty and experience. When challenge is consistently low, players may act on autopilot and lose interest. When challenge spikes without warning or clarity, players may become cautious or disengaged. Observing when players lean forward versus when they withdraw provides useful evidence about how challenge is landing. The lens of challenge also highlights the difference between difficulty and uncertainty. A situation can be mechanically demanding while remaining emotionally flat if outcomes feel predictable. Conversely, a mechanically simple situation can feel intense when information is limited and consequences are clear. This lens helps diagnose whether tension is emerging from meaningful risk or from procedural burden. For game masters, this lens offers a practical diagnostic question. How hard does this encounter feel right now, and why? The answer often lies in framing rather than mechanics. Adjustments might involve clarifying stakes, escalating pressure, or varying opposition rather than increasing numbers or adding complexity. These changes can recalibrate challenge without altering the underlying system. For designers, the lens of challenge is especially valuable across multiple playtests. It reveals whether difficulty scales in ways that support learning and confidence, or whether it plateaus or spikes unpredictably. Tracking when players feel stretched versus overwhelmed helps identify where challenge needs refinement. Viewed alongside the lenses of choice and time, the lens of challenge helps explain pacing and momentum. Players remain engaged when challenge responds to their actions and capabilities. When challenge drifts out of alignment, this lens helps locate the source and guide more precise adjustments. The lens of skill examines what abilities a game actually rewards over time. It focuses on the competencies players develop and rely on as play continues, whether those skills are mechanical, social, tactical, or interpretive. Schell frames skill as something games cultivate through repetition. Players improve at whatever the system consistently asks them to do. Skill extends beyond numerical optimization. It includes system mastery, situational awareness, collaboration, improvisation, and judgment under uncertainty. This lens often reveals mismatches between intended and rewarded skills. A game may present itself as narrative-driven while rewarding tactical calculation. It may promise creative problem-solving while favoring procedural fluency. Observing which players act with confidence and which hesitate offers valuable diagnostic information about what kind of skill the game is emphasizing. The lens of skill also highlights accessibility and participation. When a narrow set of competencies dominates play, some players naturally take the lead, while others withdraw. In this view, this pattern is rarely about interest or effort. It reflects which skills the game recognizes and reinforces. Tracking who succeeds and how they succeed helps clarify this distribution. For game masters, this lens supports moment-to-moment diagnosis. When certain players consistently drive outcomes, attention can turn toward what skills are being privileged in the current situation. Adjustments in framing, spotlight, or resolution can broaden the range of skills that matter without changing the rules themselves. For designers, the lens of skill is especially useful during playtesting. It reveals what mastery looks like in practice and whether that mastery aligns with the intended audience. Repeated success through a narrow strategy suggests that the system is training players toward a specific skill set, regardless of stated goals. Viewed alongside the lenses of challenge and rules, the lens of skill helps explain why players engage the way they do. Over time, games teach players how to play them. This lens makes that teaching visible. So now let's take a look at some examples. So the step-by-step Game Master diagnostic loops look something like this. You name the symptom in one sentence. Combat is dragging, players are hesitating, everyone is talking past each other. And you pick one lens. They don't stack. So experience, choice, time, complexity, emotion, etc. Ask the lens question and observe for a few minutes or maybe longer. You're collecting evidence, not explaining causes yet. You state a diagnosis in plain language. Players are waiting too long between meaningful moments. You make one procedural adjustment. a change in how you run the scene, reframe choices, pace resolution, or distribute spotlight. You recheck with the same lens, and if the symptom improves, you keep the adjustment. If not, you revert and try a different lens. So, using the lens of experience, you might observe players disengaging between turns, attention drifting, or phones appearing at the table. That points to too much waiting between meaningful moments. A practical procedural adjustment here is to add between turn prompts, reactions, or simple "what are you doing while this happens" questions to keep players mentally involved even when it isn't their turn. Through the lens of choice, you may notice the same action being repeated round after round with very little discussion. That suggests decisions feel routine or low impact. A useful adjustment is to clarify consequences before rolls and make outcomes legible in advance so players understand how different choices will change the situation. Looking at play through the lens of time, you might see a single round taking 10 to 15 minutes while the fiction barely advances. That might indicate a temporal mismatch that dissolves urgency. A small procedural change could be batching enemy actions, summarizing minor effects, or tightening how turn declarations are handled. With the lens of complexity, frequent rule lookups and math-dominating table talk are strong signals that cognitive load might be consuming attention. In response, a game master might default rulings more often, simplify modifiers in the moment, or rely on pre-decided enemy behaviors to keep play moving swiftly. Through the lens of goals, players may seem unsure what winning looks like in the middle of a fight. That could suggest immediate objectives are unclear. A helpful adjustment is to restate or reveal short-term goals, such as escaping, delaying an enemy, protecting something, or disrupting an objective. Using the lens of rules, you might observe players consistently avoiding certain actions. This could indicate the rules are rewarding safety or optimization over other behaviors. A procedural response is to emphasize alternative rewards already present in the system, such as positioning, advantage, momentum, or some other narrative impact. With the lens of feedback, players may repeatedly ask, "Did that do anything?" which could signal that outcomes are unclear or delayed. A simple adjustment might be to narrate immediate, concrete changes in the situation after each action so players can see cause and effect more clearly. Looking through the lens of surprise, you might notice players accurately predicting enemy behavior and outcomes. This could suggest that combat has become fully legible. A small change could involve shifting enemy priorities, introducing new information, or altering the environment or the creatures mid-fight. Through the lens of challenge, you may see players acting on autopilot or becoming overly cautious. That might point to difficulty being misaligned with player capability. An effective adjustment might be to change pressure through stakes or opposition behavior rather than increasing numbers or complexity. Using the lens of skill, you might notice the same players consistently dominating decision making. This might reveal that a narrow skill set is being rewarded. A procedural adjustment could be framing moments that reward different skills, such as coordination, risk-taking, or creative problem-solving. Now let's take a look at the diagnostic use in development and in game design. The goal is to identify system behavior under real conditions, the timescales across play tests, and what we're looking for is targeted revision questions, one variable at a time and not feature creep. So a step-by-step design diagnostic loop looks something like this. You define the intended experience, one sentence: fast, dangerous fights, collaborative mystery solving, tactical teamwork under pressure. You choose one lens for this section of the playtest. You treat it like a research question. You instrument the playtest. You decide what you will capture: time per procedure, number of meaningful choices, rules, lookups, emotional beats, depending on what you're looking for. You observe without patching mid-session. You log patterns. You avoid explaining rules intent during the test unless the test is specifically about teachability. You write a diagnosis and a revision question. The diagnosis might be players avoid risk because failure feels punitive and opaque. And the revision question might be what changes if failure produces a cost plus new information. You change one variable before the next play test, and you repeat with the same lens to see if the pattern shifts. For example, looking at this through the lens of experience, you might observe that players disengage while waiting and that side conversations increase. That might tell you the moment-to-moment experience includes too much passivity. A useful diagnostic question here might be, what are non-active players doing during resolution? One possible single variable change would be to add structured off-turn reactions or shared phases that keep everyone involved. Through the lens of choice, you may notice that players default to one optimal action again and again. This might suggest the system collapses the choice space under pressure. One diagnostic question might be which decisions meaningfully change outcomes. A focused adjustment could be increasing payoff clarity for non-default options so alternatives feel worth considering. Using the lens of time, you might see that a combat round consistently exceeds its fictional weight. That might indicate resolution time is communicating unintended importance. One diagnostic question might be which steps consume the most time and why. A single variable change could be collapsing a multi-step resolution into a single roll. With the lens of complexity, you may observe that rules lookups cluster around combat. This might point to cognitive load peaking at the wrong moment. One diagnostic question here might be which subsystems activate simultaneously. So one possible adjustment is removing or merging a single modifier layer to reduce the in-moment strain. Through the lens of goals, you may find that players are unclear on success conditions in the middle of combat. This could indicate that short-term goals are not legible. So one diagnostic question might be, can players state what winning means right now? A possible adjustment is adding explicit encounter objectives beyond simply defeating enemies. Using the lens of rules, you might observe that players consistently avoid risky actions. That could reveal that incentives reward safety over drama. One diagnostic question might be, what behaviors do the rewards reinforce? One targeted change could be adjusting reward timing rather than reward size. With the lens of feedback, you may notice players repeatedly asking for clarification after actions. This might point to unclear cause and effect. The diagnostic question might be, how quickly do players see results? A useful adjustment could be adding immediate fictional feedback before mechanical results are resolved. Looking through the lens of surprise, you might see outcomes becoming predictable by the second session. That could indicate uncertainty is collapsing through repetition. One diagnostic question might be which patterns become legible too quickly. One focus change could be introducing variable enemy priorities. Through the lens of challenge, you may observe early encounters feeling trivial, while later encounters spike sharply. This might suggest difficulty scaling is uneven. One diagnostic question might be, where does challenge ramp up abruptly? And a possible adjustment is smoothing escalation through pressure rather than increasing numbers. Using the lens of skill, you might see system mastery dominating success. That might reveal a narrow skill set is being trained by the game. The diagnostic question here might be, what skills does repeated play reward? One change could be adding mechanics that reward coordination or creativity. On this channel, I draw from a wide range of disciplines: game design, theater, psychology, education, architecture, systems theory, because each of those fields offers its own way of understanding how games function. Many of the ideas I talk about are best thought of as lenses, focused perspectives that make certain aspects of play easier to see while allowing others to fall into the background. That selective focus is a feature and not a flaw. A lens sharpens perception by narrowing it. No single lens can explain everything that happens in a tabletop role-playing game, and expecting one to do so usually leads to oversimplification. A fuller understanding comes from applying multiple lenses over time, comparing what each one reveals, and noticing where they agree or diverge. Together, those perspectives create a more complete picture of how and why a game behaves the way it does at the table. Tabletop role-playing games occupy a distinctive space. They are structured games, but they are also collaborative performances and social rituals. Rules shape play, yet tone, trust, pacing, and attention shape it just as strongly. Because of that, many table problems originate in structure rather than intent. When something feels wrong during a session, the explanation often gravitates toward individuals. A player seems distracted. The game master appears unprepared. Someone is not engaging with the tone of the game. Those explanations sometimes apply, but they don't always account for recurring patterns. More often, the system itself is quietly guiding behavior in ways that no one planned. This is where lenses become particularly effective. A lens encourages you to step back from individual actions and examine the structure that produces them. The lens of experience draws attention to what players are doing while they wait. The lens of time highlights how long uncertainty persists before resolution. The focus shifts towards observable behavior and away from speculation about motivation. Lenses also respect variation between tables. Different groups value different kinds of play. Some enjoy tactical depth and careful planning. Others value emotional momentum or narrative exploration. A diagnostic lens does not privilege one preference over another. It helps determine whether the game being run or designed is producing the experience a particular table is seeking. This diagnostic framing also supports improvisation. Because lenses are questions rather than procedures, they can be used during prep, during play, or in reflection afterward. A game master can notice a lull, apply a single lens, and adjust how the game is being facilitated in the moment. A designer can observe a recurring pattern across playtests and use a lens to isolate its cause before revising the system. Perhaps most importantly, lenses change how problems are discussed. When an issue is framed as system behavior, it becomes something the table can examine together. That shift tends to lower defensiveness and increase curiosity. The conversation moves towards understanding what the game is producing right now and away from assigning fault. For these reasons, Schell's lenses work well as a shared diagnostic language for both game masters and designers. They train attention, they sharpen observation, and over time they help replace guesswork with informed adjustment. If this framework was useful, I'd love to hear how you're applying it at your own table or in your own designs. So drop your questions, examples, or thoughts in the comments section below. If you found this helpful, give it a like, consider subscribing, and share it with someone you think would find it beneficial. And as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.